because Sue is going to be doing our program. But I do have a couple things I need to say to you. We have cards going around. It's Nancy Pulowski's birthday, and it's funny because if any of you came to the haunted house that was down there, one of the stories was about Nancy Pulowski, who did work here for me when Mitch was sick, and she was so frightened to be in this building because it has lots of spooky noises and things. So if I came in, some music would be playing loudly and all the lights would be on, and she would never be here after dark. And so that became one of the spooky stories that we told. But it's Nancy's birthday. And then we have a get well card for Kevin Brown, because he just needs to go to the doctor. And he hurt his arm, and he's sure it's going to heal on its own. And we're thinking it might not. So this is just to encourage Kevin to go to the doctor. Sorry. We have friends from Springbrook back again, that I'm really happy that you're back. And I just have a little bit of news about the church. And we talked about Springbrook, and we have the wonderful model of the St. Peter and Paul's Catholic Church from Springbrook. And we said that we were looking for a home for that. We think that it's going to go to the Catholic Church here, because we've heard that maybe some of the smaller churches around are everybody's consolidating and there won't be a place for it. So, and I don't know what his name is, Father? Okay, he's going to come out here with Jack Willie and look at the church, but they think they have a place for it. So, good possibility that we might be able to have a safe place to keep that, because it's a wonderful thing. So I thought you'd be happy to hear that. I just want to thank everybody who came to our Halloween thing. We had 4 spooky nights, Saturday and Sunday, and then this past Saturday and Sunday, lots and lots of work, but our Halloween haunted houses were very successful and a good fundraiser for us, which we could really use right now. So thank you everybody who helped with that. We've got still a busy time for the rest of the year. If you haven't heard, I hope you have, that Sunday the 26th, which is this coming up Sunday, at the museum on the fairgrounds at 2 o'clock, will be a very, very special program about Seeberger's Cave. And it's not often that we get such a fine speaker. Bill Green is coming to talk. For 20 years, he was the state archaeologist of Iowa, in Iowa City. So he is certainly qualified. He left there, and for 20 years he went to Beloit, Wisconsin, where he was a special curator kind of person, maybe director of the Logan College of Anthropology, I think is what it's called. He was director of that, and it just happens that it was that particular place that came here 99 years ago and excavated the Seeberger Cave. And so he's going to be here to talk about that. And it's going to be a wonderful program, so I hope that you'll spread the word, and I hope everybody will come to that. The next Sunday is going to be our Heritage Dinner Sunday. That's when his program was supposed to be. Not going to be happening, it's going to be happening a week ahead of time. But on November 2nd, Sunday afternoon, November 2nd at 3:30, Dennis and Alice Manns are going to do a wonderful program about Dr. David Luce and his wife Francilia. Wonderful, wonderful people, and all of the contributions they've made to this area. So it's going to be a very neat program. Afterwards, there'll be a silent auction, and the Heritage Dinner will be from 4 o'clock to 6:30 in Jensen Hall in the Bearden Building. So hopefully you will come to both of those things and support those events, because they're going to be very, very nice. Next week, Don Wentworth is going to be doing his Halloween program. If his wife lets him, he said. If his wife doesn't let him, hopefully I'll be able to try that, and maybe it'll be me. I just want to thank Sue Mayberry so much for the program that she's going to do today, and it's a very important subject. So thank you, Sue Mayberry.
Good morning. For those of you that are regulars, which I see most of you are here, you know I know a little about a lot of topics, so I'm no expert on World War I by any means. I've read 3 books and know just a little bit about it. And over the last few years when I've been doing brown bag lunches, I think in the beginning I did ones that had to do with my family, and so then sometimes you'd ask, do you have a family member in this? And so this is one of those presentations that I do have a personal interest in, which is kind of what motivated me to learn more about this. They died in France, World War I heroes. On June 28, 1914, oh, and I forgot, I should probably mention too, does anybody in here speak or read French? Okay, good, because I was trying to do my best here to pronounce all these French names, and it's like, they're really hard. So I may just get to the point where I just kind of skip over that, but I've got this page of notes on helping me how to pronounce these things, so I'm sure I'm going to make some mistakes. So on June 28, 1914, the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated by Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Princip. Austria-Hungary then issued an ultimatum of demands, to which Serbia failed to reply. Within a month, 2 coalitions had formed in Europe. The Allied powers, France, Russia, and Great Britain, and the Central powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. World War I had begun. The U.S. officially remained neutral in the war until April 1st, 1917, when German U-boats torpedoed the SS Aztec, killing 28 Americans. The war continued for another year and a half, formally ending on November 11, 1918, when Germany signed the armistice. World War I is considered one of the deadliest conflicts in history, with an estimated 9 million combatant and 7 million civilian deaths resulting directly from the war. When the World War I hostilities initially broke out, President Wilson advocated for the U.S. to remain neutral. With an ocean separating the U.S. from Europe, U.S. citizens accepted this stance, and America maintained neutrality for the first years of the war. This neutrality, however, was challenged by both sides of the war front. Britain refused to allow U.S. cargo ships to deliver goods to Germany and began seizing American goods, which forced a steep decline in American-German trade. To counteract the British efforts, Germany began to use U-boats, submarines, around the British Isles. This led to the destruction of many ships and the deaths of numerous passengers. The most significant attack by German U-boats was the attack on Lusitania, which led to the deaths of 1,200 passengers, including 128 Americans, in May of 1915. Despite the destruction of American ships and the deaths of American citizens, President Wilson continued to encourage neutrality and sought to restrict submarine warfare. Initially, Germany agreed to cease attacks on unarmed passenger ships. However, in February 1917, Chancellor Theobald, his name is hard to say, von Bethmann-Hollweg, declared unrestricted submarine warfare. America quickly cut its trade with Germany, and on April 6, 1917, the U.S. declared war on Germany. In order to provide the necessary troops, the Selective Service Act of 1917 authorized conscription, and as you know, it required millions of American men to register for the draft and receive draft cards. By the end of June 1917, American combat forces were arriving on French soil. And by October 1917, the first American casualties occurred. The U.S. would go on to lose tens of thousands of soldiers on land and sea, many of whom were buried on foreign soil. So I'd like to see like a show of hands of those of you that had relatives that did actively participate in World War I. Okay, so a number of you. On March 21st, 1918, Germany began their spring offensive in hopes to end the war before the U.S. was able to send more troops. Using brief artillery fire and small groups of infantry to attack weak points, the Germans were able to make significant progress through the French countryside, coming within 75 miles of Paris. Their tactics relied heavily on surprise, however, and after initial successes, their efforts were mostly halted. American troops poured into France at the rate of 10,000 per day, bolstering morale for the war-weary Allied forces. With the help of U.S. soldiers, the Allied powers were able to turn back the German spring offensive and mount their own 100 days of offense. This was the final push in the war and led Germany to sign the armistice on November 11, 1918. After the armistice was signed, American troops began to withdraw and returned home with medals and pensions for their services. The U.S. sustained more than 320,000 casualties during World War I, and the American Expeditionary Force evolved into an army recognized as one of the best in the world. So this photo shown of American gunners as they battle through the Argonne forest in France. Iowa's contribution. I gotta look to see how to pronounce this. Okay, Moose Argonne. The Moose Argonne Offensive, the largest engagement of the American Expeditionary Forces in World War I, involved significant contributions from Iowa. The 168th Infantry Regiment, drawing many of its initial selected servicemen from Iowa, distinguished itself in several key battles, including the Moose Argonne. Iowa also provided manpower through the 88th Division and trained troops at Camp Dodge and Fort Des Moines. This offensive was the deadliest campaign in American history, resulting in over 26,000 soldiers being killed in action and over 120,000 total casualties. And so this presentation is mostly talking about the ones that did die in France, because obviously the scope of all the other soldiers, it would just be too much for an hour-long presentation. The Moose Argonne Offensive, which involved fighting in the Argonne Forest, pitted American and French forces against the German army. The Americans, under the command of General John J. Pershing, and their French allies aimed to break through the German lines and advance towards Sedan. The objective of the Allied forces was to breach the heavily fortified Hindenburg Line and advance beyond it. The Hindenburg Line was a series of heavily fortified defense positions, including trenches, barbed wire entanglements, machine gun nests, and artillery replacements designed to halt any Allied offensive. And I was talking with Mary Kay about this barbed wire, because, with their military background, because I thought, why is there all this barbed wire? Well, the Germans had some kind of a device and they blew it in. They just blew it out there. And I guess you just assume there was just barbed wire fences, but no, they purposely put all that barbed wire in there. The ultimate objective with the Allied forces was to bring about the collapse of the German army and compel Germany to seek an armistice and end the war. Prior to the Moose Argonne Offensive, Pershing was an American commander of, to me it looks like it should be pronounced Saint Mihiel, but it's actually pronounced San Miem. San Miem Operation. And I do have a book on that. I'll talk about it in a minute. The lieutenant of the French army revised objectives and timetables that put quite a bit of strain on the American forces with this San Miem offense. Pershing resisted demands that American forces be amalgamated into British and French units. So they just wanted, us to just mix in the Americans with these other units, which, Pershing said no, And so then at one point, the French lieutenant said, "Do you wish to take part in this battle?" And Pershing said to him, most assuredly, but as an American army. The artwork here is shown by artist Lester Hornby, and it can be found at the U.S. Army Art Collection. And it doesn't show up very well. Shown are American soldiers in the forest. This photo can be accessed from the National Archives and Records admission. "60% of all battlefield deaths in World War I were caused by artillery." And I'm just going to call it the offensive, because it's just so hard to say, keep saying that. Lewis, or going offensive, had plenty of it. And here are scenes of the soldiers in the battle in the forest. Soldiers lying dead where they fell on the field. And this picture was taken in 1918. The dead soldiers were most often buried at or near the battlefield. After the war, Americans and some other countries could request bodies of their fallen husbands, fathers, or sons. Of the 500,000 Iowa men registered for the draft, about 115,000 served in the armed forces. American combat deaths in World War I totaled over 53,000, but about 45,000 American soldiers died of influenza and related pneumonia by the end of 1918. And for those of you that came to, raise your hand if you came to the brown bag lunch with they talked about the Spanish flu. Okay. So some of the soldiers I'll be mentioning again just because they were the ones that died in France. So more than 675,000 Americans died of this flu in 1918. While credit for the victory belongs to all the Allied nations, there's little doubt the success of the American forces during this offensive, and that was the major factor in Germany's surrender. So that they fought in the forest. 1 week later, the armistice was signed, and World War I was over. The fighting ended at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. How many knew that? Yeah, I didn't know what's with all those 11. So November 11th, 1918. When it ended, this campaign in the forest was the greatest battle that the U.S. Army had ever fought. Almost 1.25 million American troops had participated during the course of the 47-day campaign. And shown is the U.S. flag, and this is from 1918, shows 20 stars and 13 stripes. Milo Willard Culver was born February 4th, 1896 in Green Island. He was the son of Oliver Culver and Nettie Ann Hopper. Oliver and Nettie were the parents of 5 boys and 1 girl. Milo Culver died at age 22 while serving his country in France as a private with the 30th Division. Does anyone know the Culver family? Okay. And do you think that this is probably a relative? I didn't take the time, I guess, to go back and figure out if all of these fallen heroes, are related to people here yet in Jackson County. So word was received at Green Island announcing the death of Culver, who died of the wounds that he received October 24th. He was well known to many in the Bellevue community who grieved his death. He left for Camp Dodge in the same contingent as Nick Meedinger did. And Nick Meedinger also did not come back from the war. The 2 boys remained together when sent to New Jersey and later to France, both of them being together when wounded by gas. Milo had recovered from his gas wounds and met his death from wounds he received in a later engagement. Shown is his burial in Hazen Cemetery, Washington Township. John Lewis Doherty was born July 1st, 1892, the son of Cornelius and Sarah Elizabeth Conlon. Cornelius and Sarah were the parents of 3 sons. Doherty served with the 60th USNC Regiment 78th Company and was killed in action at the Battle of Mount Ridge. He is buried in the Bellevue Catholic Cemetery. Joseph Dion was born July 22, 1889 in Chicago. and died August 5, 1918, at the age of 29. He is buried in Cibola. This soldier was originally buried in France, but was returned to the U.S. and buried there in July of 1921. Dion served with the U.S. Army, 39th Infantry, 4th Division, Company M. Christian Harmon Doom was born in Jackson County on February 1, 1894, the son of Herman Heinrich Gerhard Doom and Anna Louisa Maria Miney. Herman and Anna were the parents of 7 children. Shown on right are Christian baptism papers from 1894. Doom served with the 349th Infantry, Company Doom, and the 118th Infantry, Company C, in France until his death, October 12, 1918. Frank A. Feller was born April 16, 1896. He died in France on November 6, 1918, at the age of 22. Feller is buried in St. Joseph's Catholic Cemetery in Preston. He was the son of Theodore Feller and Teresa Meyer, and they were the parents of 6 sons. Herman F. Fickbaum was born March 19, 1891, in St. Donatus. Fickbaum's parents were Edward and Alice Mead. Edward, a native of Germany, and Alice, a native of Galena, were the parents of 7 children. Private Herman Fickbaum of Galena was killed in action sometime between August 4th and 8th of 1918 on the battlefields of France. He entered the U.S. military service from Galena and was sent to Camp Grant in Rockford, Illinois. He sailed for France in May of 1918 and was the first Galena boy killed in action. He was in the employ of the Frontier Mining Company at the time that he left to go to camp. Howard Lubin, and I know Howard is related, to the Baldwin Lubins. Howard Lubin was born March 30th, 1896, to Benjamin Franklin Lubin and Jenny Sandhouse of Baldwin. Howard Lubin had 5 brothers and 2 sisters. Lubin served with the U.S. Army 320th Battalion, Company B, and he was killed in action at the age of 22. He is buried in Penn Cemetery. McPeak newspaper notice: a noted Iowa athlete appeared among the casualty list issued by the government as having died in France. He went to France in the summer as the member of the Minnesota Artillery Force. Some little time ago, he was given a French cross for brave deeds that he performed 2 months earlier. During a bombardment 2 months ago, Harvey and 5 other mates sought refuge in a dugout, but were buried by the explosion of a German shell. McPeak succeeded in freeing himself, and with a pick and shovel, he was busily engaged rescuing his companions when 5 Germans attacked him. He converted his tools into weapons of war and killed 3 of the Huns, while the other 2 fled for safety. It was probably at this time that he was wounded, as previously reported. Harvey McPeak was born in Maquoketa, the son of Albert McPeak and Olive Ann Wood. Harvey married Nellie Louise Palmer, October 28, 1909. Well, this is really a sad story about this whole family. Within a couple years, the whole family was gone. So they were the parents of Lawrence Glenn McPeak, who died at 1 month of age. And then his wife Nellie died in 1916, and then of course her husband died in 1918. And they're buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Wright, Iowa. Raymond Frederick Marcus. And notice how Marcus is spelled with a K, and I don't know, they probably are related to the Marcuses, with a different spelling. Was born July 11, 1895 in Lamont, and was killed in action November 1st in Lorraine, France. He is buried in the Holy Rosary Cemetery in Lamont. He was the son of William Marcus and Catherine Hayes, and the Bellevue Herald Leader reported, Marcus was a graduate of the Holy Rosary High School and was called upon for service. For a short time, he was at the Jefferson Barracks, and from there, transferred to Camp MacArthur in Waco, Texas, and then he sailed to France on August 2nd. He was a member of Company G, 56th Regiment of the Iowa Infantry. The mother and 1 sister had preceded him many years ago in death. The 56th Infantry Regiment was a regular infantry regiment in the United States Army. For its actions during World War I, his regiment was awarded the campaign streamer, I wrote streamer, and I think, yeah, streamer, Lorraine, 1918. Unless it's supposed to be steamer. What do you think? Streamer or steamer? I didn't catch that before. During this campaign in the forest, it was on the left bank of the Moselle, the nearest American organization to Metz, and was preparing to attack when the armistice was signed. Nicholas Medinger was the son of Michael Medinger and Susan Hall. Nick was born in 1892 in Bellevue Township. Private Medinger, shown in photo, served with the 30th Division, 118th Infantry Regiment, and was killed October 21st, 1918. He died from wounds sustained in battle. His brother John, who was born in 1896, also died that same year and is buried in St. Peter and Paul Cemetery. And I didn't get a chance to check, as far as if the brother was in the military or, how his death occurred. I do not know. Does anyone know? Private Albert Roman Mickles was the son of John Peter Mickles and Annie Entringer, who were the parents of 13 children. Mickles was born September 13, 1894 in Springbrook and died October 24, 1918 in France. He was reburied in St. Joseph's Catholic Cemetery on July 30th, 1921. So Bonnie gave me this note that has to do with this gentleman. And this was called in by Lois Moeller Sheepers. Anybody know Lois?
She's a nurse at the hospital.
Nurse at the hospital. And Daniel was her great uncle. And she said that he was killed 4 days before the war ended. And that's just so sad to have made it, that far. And he is buried in Normandy. And he was the brother of Henry. Daniel was. But he also had a lot of other brothers and sisters. Daniel Moeller from Preston died in Lorraine, France on November 4th, 1918. He was the son of Johann Heinrich Moeller and Maria Ratloff. He was born February 11, 1890 in Iowa. He had 14 brothers and sisters. And he is buried at, and this is, again, I wrote down how to say this one. Romain Sue Man Foucault. This is where he is buried, that cemetery. Private First Class Roy J. O'Connor enlisted with the 313th Engineer Company A on May 26th. He died in France and is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery. Roy was the firstborn son of Michael O'Connor and Minnie Christine Peterson Brogard. Roy had 6 brothers and sisters. Prior to his enlistment, he was living in Bernard. Bernard A. Ports was born July 13, 1893 in Springbrook, the firstborn son of John B. Ports and Mary A. Tringer. He died October 11, 1918 in Harcourt, France. Ports was a farmer and had 10 brothers and sisters. Private Ports served with the 352nd Infantry, 88th Division. He is buried in the St. Peter and Paul Cemetery in Springbrook. George Henry Schaub was a corporal with the 347th Infantry, 87th Division. And I did know years ago some Schaubs from Bellevue, and I mean, he looks just like the man that I knew. Does anybody else know the Schaub? Yeah. Do you think so too? Yeah, when I see these pictures too, and even like the soldier, Mr. Doom, it's like you can just tell what family they belong to. He was born September 26, 1890, the son of George Schaub and Mary Cull. Dubuque Telegraph-Herald announcement on November 29, 1918. The War Department has announced the death of another of Bellevue's prominent young men. Word was received by Mr. George Schaub of the death of his son, Corporal George Schaub. in France on October 30th, 1918, of pneumonia. To everyone in the city, he was familiarly known as Bud Shaw, and the news of his death brought tears to many eyes. He was 28 years old, and before he had entered the Army, he was a rural mail carrier out of Bellevue. He was one of the first drafted boys to leave here, and after being transferred from Camp Dodge to Camp Pike, he was promoted to corporal and made orderly to the colonel of his regiment. He left in September of this year for France and was attending an officer's school there. He leaves behind his father and one sister, Miss Zella at home, and two brothers, Fred at Camp Gordon and Wilbur at Camp Dodge survived. His brothers both survived the war. Frederick died in 1970 and Wilbur in 1971, and that same year their sister Zella died. Tasso H. Shoup, wish I could have found a picture for him, was the son of Jürgen Heinrich Wilhelm William Shoup and Maria Wilhelmina Sophia Reikens. Shoup was born December 8, 1893 in Richland Township. He died on October 31st, 1819 in France and is buried in the Lutheran Cemetery in Bellevue. He served as a private with the 352nd Infantry, 88th Division, Company M. Prior to enlistment, he was living in Des Moines. Private Byron W. Spencer died September 29th in France. He was a Camp Gordon replacement draft, serving in Company 21. From the info I found, Spencer is supposedly buried in Mount Hope, but I haven't really confirmed that. Menzo J. Weidel was the son of Nathan J. Weidel, I'm not sure how to say that. Weidel. And Elizabeth Lizzie.
Well, I think she's got it spelled wrong.
They spelled it two ways. It was spelled two ways on different information pertaining to him. And he was born in Nashville. Menzo was a brother to Dana, Ivan, and Lyle. He was killed in action September 13th, 1918, and is buried in Buckhorn Cemetery. Private Weidel served with the 359th Infantry, Company I. Yes, Bonnie?
There were just a large number of people from his family that were here recently that were researching about him. Kathy was helping, I think, and we were looking for information for them.
Okay, so Bonnie said you're researching that family or recently.
His family was here researching.
Or his family was researching. Right. Okay. How the Germans lived in the forest. This photo depicts how the Germans lived in the Argonne forest. And note, this is a concrete structure. So they did have the advantage over the Allies. Here's another German shelter located at Cheppy. And when I Googled that and how to spell that Cheppy, I don't know, but it just didn't show up. That word does not show up. So whether it's misspelled or it doesn't exist anymore, I don't know. But again, this is a solid structure, stone structure. The photographer of this photo, Western Newspaper Union, labeled enemy activities. Prince Max, in charge of the German troops defending the forest, had his headquarters in bomb-proof shelter, protected by walls of cement. Barbed wire was deployed in the forest during World War I, specifically during the Meuse-Argonne offensive, to create a formidable defense system for the German forces. It was used to entangle trenches, create obstacle in no man's land, and protect machine gun nests and pillboxes, making it a key element in the dense and heavily fortified German defensive lines. Last German retreat, fall of 1918, German infantry in support trenches during a gas attack. And note the casualties. You see one right here. These troops were being attacked by the American Army during the Argonne offensive. The U.S. force. Caption for this photo reads, 14-inch gun talks for U.S. men of the 35th Coast Artillery. loading a mobile railroad gun, 13.9-inch caliber on the Argonne front, Valleyport, France. And this photo is from 1918 also. Among the ruins of Chepi and on a nearby hillside, a company of American infantrymen pitched their shelter half tents for the night on their way to the Argonne front. In the foreground, horses drink their fill from a river. And this credit to the photo, U.S. Army Signal Corps. Can you see that very well?
Too many lights on.
Shown is a French radio arc set used by the American Army. So, you think about, the communications obviously different than what they were in the other world wars. Wood cutting in the Argonne. These logs have been brought to the roadside from the forest by a narrow gauge track. It may have been observed that the leg held by the men had been shelled in one end, and I can't really see that clearly enough. And this was taken by Sergeant Ryden of South Carolina. Original caption, dugouts that sheltered our boys in the Argonne forest. So see all these holes were the dugouts. Individual shelters dug by Americans in their attack on the Argonne forest, where a regiment of American troops were surrounded and refused to surrender to the Hun. So they lived in holes like these until they fought their way out again. And my grandfather lived in holes like those for months. The photographer, Western Newspaper Union. American Coast Artillery men who are backing up the American advances in the Argonne. The gun, working in liaison with airplane observation, pound the enemy's lines from a distance of 20 miles. So I didn't realize they could, had those capabilities to do that. This is where Germany kept American prisoners. 1 kilo northwest of, and again, that name, it looks like it should be Bayonville, but I know it's pronounced different, in the Argonne Forest, France, taken in 1919. Bonnie?
I keep interrupting, but in World War II, in this same place, I think it's where Asher Schrader was held prisoner, and he was in one of those bunkers that Sue just showed, and he had been wounded in the foot, and they were in there when the Germans came in and drug them out, and Asher was put in this.
So Bonnie just said that Maquoketa native Asher Schrader.
Right. He was like 6'4", 6'5". Asher was a really big man, as you remember, and he weighed 117 pounds when he came back.
So he had lost, when he came back, he lost 50
The prisoner of war for a long time.
pounds or more. That was a great sacrifice. Scene of battle from the Ted Marks collection. Another scene of the battle. During the Meuse Argonne offensive, the American infantry received support from 189 tanks. The FT-17 shown here is a French design. The first ever with a fully rotating turret. They carried either a machine gun, as seen here, or a 37mm gun. The FT-17 is regarded as the prototype for the modern tank. And this photo courtesy of the USAHEC. The telegraph office at the Message Center headquarters, 82nd Division. And they took part in the Saint, I would have said Saint Michael, but it's on Miam, and the Argonne. Caption reads, wood cutting in the Argonne forest. German prisoners have cut a great deal of this wood, which is now being used by Americans in the nearby vicinity. Shown are members of the 75th Aero Repair Company hauling this wood from the forest. Soldiers shown delivering ammunition to battery. This photo shows the difficulty the Americans experienced with transportation in the Argonne. It just was really a treacherous terrain. This photo from the Truman collection depicts Battery 9, 129th Field Artillery in September of 1918. Signal Corps material being hauled back from the Argonne Forest by Quartermaster Corps and salvaged at Clermont, France. And the photographer is Sergeant Ryden, again of South Carolina. Homer Griffin Rowland was a private first class U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps. He was born December 16, 1892 in Bellevue and baptized in Van Buren Township. His parents were Martin Oscar Rowland and Mary Rebecca White. He was the oldest of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. His brother, who was 2 years younger, and 1 sister, most likely died as an infant. When Homer Rowland was young, the family moved to Harlan Township, Shelby, Iowa. His father was first a farmer, and then a land office agent, later a manufacturer of gloves, then an advertising manager, and next an ad writer for wholesale radio. He was also a successful teacher. Shown on left is Homer Griffin Rowland, and on right is a young child with his parents. He attended the University of Iowa from 1915 to 1918 and is shown here with his classmates. I mean, we just lost a lot of talent in this world. Rowland was the first student editor of the Daily Iowan. Shown is the building where Rowland stayed from December 19th while serving in France. And this line drawn here, it says Homer's room. And he lived there from December 19th on. He departed from New Jersey in March of 1918, and he died later that year in December in France. The photo on the right was taken in 1917, and he is buried in France, and showing his burial. As the battle progressed, both the Americans and the French brought in reinforcements. Eventually, 22 American divisions participated in battle at one time or another, representing 2 full field armies. The Americans estimated that they opposed parts of 44 German divisions overall, though many fewer at any one time. Shown on the map is the location of the Meuse Argonne American Memorial located in France. At our nation's capital is a World War I memorial in which the Meuse Argonne battle is represented. This is the official national memorial for World War I and includes a statue of General John J. Pershing, who commanded the American forces in the Argonne offensive. The 2015 National Defense Authorization Act authorized the World War I Centennial Commission to build the memorial. This is located at Pershing Park at 14th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. And while the Washington, D.C. Memorial honors the offensive, the cemetery is the final resting place for over 14,000 American service members who died during the battle. And I was able to visit this a few years ago and did get to see, the part of it that had to do with this offensive. And it's just really, just sad and humbling when you're in a place like that and just, shown is a cemetery in, and I would have said Romaine, but it's Romain, shown at Romain, France, where 21,000 Americans are interred. This concrete pillbox was typical of the types of defenses soldiers faced as they advanced upon the Germans. I don't know if you can see it here. It's the pillbox. The Germans had occupied the area for years, and they developed an elaborate defense system of 4 fortified lines with a dense network. And again, we had talked about the wire entanglements, the barbed wire, had their machine guns all over the places, and then they had all these concrete fighting posts. And in between those trench lines, the Germans had a series of strong points in the woods and knolls. The Allied soldiers also had to contend with the heavy rains that turned the terrain into mud, and it bogged down the tanks and the artillery, and it slowed resupply efforts. The heavy fog, rain, and broken terrain really tested many of our inexperienced troops. And despite these obstacles, the Americans fought through some of the strongest positions on the Western Front and captured 9,000 prisoners and large amounts of supplies and equipment. The offensive involved 3 phases. In the first phase, the battlefield of the Allies launched one of the most expensive and stunning artillery barrages. The barrage was done with 2,711 artillery guns and helped to destroy obstacles like barbed wire to help the Allies push up more effectively when the assault began. One of these artillery groups was led by Captain Harry S. Truman, as you know, future U.S. president. Later, with the U.S. struggling to make the progress they wanted, Pershing ordered a halt to the attack on October 1st. This allowed Pershing to regroup all the men and reinforce the line. And this move on to halt this attack, it was not popular among the Allied generals. And he almost lost his job over it. Shown are American troops going forward to the battle line in the forest, September 26, 1918, which was the first day of the first phase. Under Truman's command in France, his battery did not lose a single man in combat. His men often attributed their luck to the leadership of Captain Harry. Their close bonds forged on the battlefield endured for the rest of their lives. Through those service in the reserve, correspondence and reunions, and the men stayed in touch with each other. And you can see Harry Truman is second from the left. And these photographs can be seen in the Harry Truman Papers collection. With the second phase, the offensive started up again. Shown are the doughboys of the 18th Infantry, 1st Division, on the side of Hill 240, near Exmont, France, in October of 1918. During the second phase occurred the disaster of the Lost Battalion. Raise your hand if you've heard of that before, the Lost Battalion. And they say that that reflected badly on Pershing's leadership. The Allies finally broke through the main German defenses somewhere between October 14th and the 17th. The Rainbow Division, under Brigadier General Douglas MacArthur, secured a victory at, I really want to say this one right, but I don't have that written down. Well, anyway, it looks like it's Côte de Chatillon that was considered the decisive turning point of the whole Meuse-Argonne Forest offensive. The third phase occurred between October 28th and November 11th. Photos shown of a dead gunner in a German machine nest. Photo taken November 4th, 1918. Hugo Funk was born in Iowa, February 12, 1900, to John Funk and Barbara Braun Werner. He had 11 siblings. Funk died November 10, 1918, in France. The family had moved to Idaho in 1902. While he probably never lived in Jackson County, there's some artifacts associated with him that I wanted to share that I didn't have for the other soldiers. So this photo showing the war's devastation, and the next 3 photos were found attached to Funk's ancestry history on Ancestry.com. This one also taken in 1918. Shown is his mother, Barbara Funk, paying respect at Hugo's grave. And this is at the American Military Cemetery in Meuse. Barbara Funk was born in Wintershut County, Ohio. She was the daughter of German immigrants who had immigrated by 1849. Army notice of Hugo's death. deeply regret to advise receipt of following: Hugo J. Funk, Company B, second, and ENG, what does that stand for? Is it engineer, killed in action by enemy shell, signed General Pershing. So prior to the war, Pershing had served in a lot of different locations. And when he was, one of his last locations, when his whole family was still alive, he had not seen them for 4 months. And they were getting his headquarters ready so that his family could be with him. And he dearly loved his wife, 3 daughters and son. And unfortunately, just before they were able to relocate, there was a fire that broke out. And he lost his entire family except for his son. And so I think a lot of people don't know that about General Pershing. And so when I think about him signing this, death notice, that he would grieve every bit as much, he would understand what grief really was. Hugo Funk is buried at this cemetery. The bottom photo was taken in 1919, and the top is a more recent one. And here's a bird's eye view of the cemetery, and you kind of get more of an idea of the size of this place where so many soldiers lie. This may be a different cemetery in France, as the caption on this one reads. Let's see, Romaine, France Cemetery, where 21,000 Americans are interred. This American cemetery is near Surge, and the caption reads, "Here is buried over 150 American soldiers and officers who fought with various divisions in the Argonne." 1930 photo of the Iowa Gold Star mothers. And whether or not there's any ones out there, did I say Iowa, Idaho? Did I say Idaho? That's what I say. So there may be photos of this, of the Iowa ones, but I didn't find them. So during the 1920s, the Gold Mothers Association, they lobbied Congress. Although many of them were able to go overseas to see the graves, there were a number of women that did not have the financial means to make the trip, to be able to go overseas. What I found kind of interesting was, as it said here, these women placed great emphasis on the bond between mother and son, which is understandable. And then it said, the bond between fathers and sons was barely considered. The association maintained that the maternal bond surpassed that of the paternal bond. So although this legislation then was enacted that allowed these women to go, the men were not afforded that same opportunity. And that just seems wrong. But by October 31st, 1933, when the project ended, 6,693 women had made the pilgrimage. And they said that, that pilgrimage was a challenge for the government officials to arrange, because for one thing, they talk about these women being so elderly, between the ages of 61 and 65, as if they can't walk on their own or anything. And then also, obviously, they didn't speak any of the foreign languages. And here's showing a group of mothers and widows, party tea with Colonel Williams on the SS Republic. And that photo was taken sometime in the early 30s. Many beautiful cities in France were left in ruins. And this one, it looks like it should be pronounced Minerville. I'm sure it's pronounced something different. But just look, they're just devastating. This photo and the next two were taken by that photographer, Sergeant Ryden. And the caption, quote, "The figure or statue has been ruined by Germans during the time that they occupied the city. The hole in the figure represents where the heart was originally placed. but had been taken out by the destructive Germans. And again, this is a quote on the photo. Caption quote, ruins which largely due to German shell fire as seen from the bridge that still stands in the city at that time, still stood. I don't know that it's still there now. And then this showing a number of buildings which used to be homes of the thrifty French people, now in total ruins. And that's also near the forest. And here's another scene showing devastation wrought on these buildings. Shown is the Marbach family. In the back row are Andrew and Matthias Marbach, who both died in France. Their brothers were from Dyersville. Andrew was the first Worthington boy to give his life. He was a farmer. Photo on right of his brother Matthias. Matthias B. Marbach was born in 1894 and died in 1919 of bronchial pneumonia at sea when he was en route to fight in World War I. He's buried at sea. And the last letter from Private Andrew Marbach. Dear folks, just a few words to let you know that I am still alive yet and fine and dandy at this writing, and I hope the same of all of you. I'm just going to kind of skip ahead because we're running out of time. And then he says, be sure to look after my tools and clothes. Take good care of them because I want to make use of them next summer. Well, I will ring off for this time, send my dearing and loving regards to all. Say, Dad, go up and pay 2 masses for me on my account and do it right away to the Blessed Virgin. Caring for the wounded. This soldier shown receiving first aid from a comrade. Photo taken by the Salvation Army, wounded soldiers on the Argonne front. This soldier was seriously injured by a high explosive and was being evacuated. And I don't even want to tell you what his injuries were. They're just so horrific and permanent. And I don't even know how I can be smiling now. The Red Cross. A private from New York receiving chocolate at a field hospital. This photo and the next 2 were taken by the Red Cross. And here's another one of a young private enjoying chocolate and cakes. And you have to wonder, is he blind with the bandages on? I don't know. Seen at an American Red Cross canteen where the Allies got their lunches, tobacco, etc. The American Red Cross Home Service is shown giving comfort and reassurance to American soldiers who were anxious about the welfare of their families at home. While it's impossible to give an exact number of survivors for the entire Argonne offensive, a significant portion of the American troops who participated were casualties. The Lost Battalion incident, which I mentioned earlier, 600 men were trapped. Only 190 walked out. On October 4th, the American artillery mistakenly began shelling the Lost Battalion's position. In desperation, the last pigeon was sent with a message, our artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it. The barrage ceased at 4:20 p.m., saving the remaining troops. The Argonne Forest loomed as an impenetrable fortress to the east of a landscape of rolling fields, with small hills and heights bordered by a Meuse River, and to the west. The Argonne was more than just a forest, with dense vegetation and poor visibility. Its uneven ground, sharp cliffs, ravine streams were a barrier that would require fierce fighting to wrest from the entrenched Germans. However, once past this barrier, the American army could continue to roll through northern France to the borders of Belgium and Luxembourg. George Frederick Brown was born in Brandon Township, Jackson County, February 18, 1893. The third-born son of Jacob and Wealthy May Brown. George's father was an immigrant from Germany, and George was a private in the U.S. Army from May 26, 1918 until March 21, 1919. He was united in marriage to Ella May Taylor in 1922. And George and Ella were my grandparents. So my grandfather, he lost a lung in this war, and the other lung was damaged too. So he suffered being able to breathe the rest of his life. And I don't remember him saying this, but my sister said he talked about how, before he left to come home, the doctor said, you got a year to live. So every year that he had another birthday, he laughed and said, I sure fooled those doctors. And so anyway, just horrific, the gas. They had 3 types of poison gas that they used and just caused all kinds of terrible things. And the soldiers, even though they were trained to recognize these gas attacks, I mean, they had so much psychological stress symptoms from, never knowing, when that next attack was going to happen. And then something I'm going to share, and I don't know, maybe I shouldn't share this, but again, something I just found out about 10 years ago. My grandfather, like I said, he had struggled to breathe all his life, and I don't ever remember him being happy or smiling. He just wasn't, just kind of broken. And so a first cousin of mine said, and maybe he just didn't share it with the girls, he said that when he was in a foxhole and he had come out, and there he was, face to face with a German boy that was very, very young. Neither one had any ammunition for the guns. They were just there, so they fought. And I suppose with their bayonets or whatever it was he had, and he ended up being the victor. And the young German boy, is lying wounded, gravely wounded, and he cried, this German boy, in German. He cried all night for his mother. And my grandfather had to listen to that. And I think that just stuck with him the rest of his life. He didn't want to do that. So when I didn't realize much about the Argonne Forest, until we came across, my husband was looking at my grandfather's discharge papers, and it says the word actually engaged against the enemy at Argonne Forest. And then this other offensive, that San Miem, which I think looks like St. Michel. So a lot of the people that were in the Argonne Forest had previously fought that other battle, and that was maybe not equally as, it was brutal, maybe not equally as brutal, but brutal nonetheless. So the troops come home. Quote from To Conquer Hell. After the battle ended, American soldiers and the legions of men and women who tended their needs in sickness and health acquired new understandings of their relationships with country, government, society, family, and friends. No 2 men came out of the mules Argonne exactly the same. Some found God, others lost faith. All, however, had changed. The country would never be the same. Shown are patients being hauled to accubation trains at a hospital center for home. And these soldiers were all in that battle that we just talked about. And they were on their way to a hospital center. Demobilization. First of the warships to bring the troops home. Deck scenes on board the USS Louisiana carrying the 59th Coast Artillery men who had fought those 2 battles. And another quote from the book To Conquer Hell. The Americans did not think much of the French countryside. Iowa farmer Joe Romdell wrote to a friend, well, I suppose you want to know what I think of France. Truth is, I don't like it. It may be all right, but they are way behind the times. Most of the people here cut their oats by hand. He talked about also how filthy the French villages were. And they had like manure, and they were trying to help them clean it up, and then they moved it right back in their yards. He didn't understand what was going on. Another photo shown of the battleship Louisiana bringing troops home. The steamer Highlander with relatives welcoming their boys. Another quote from that book. No single battle in American history before or since even approaches the Meuse Argonne in size and cost, and it was without question the country's most critical military contribution to the Allied cause in the First World War. And yet, within a few years of its end, nobody seemed to realize that it had taken place. In 1919, former war correspondent wrote, "Our Greatest Battle." Since then, only 2 books, and this was as of just this last decade, only 2 books about the battle have appeared in print. It does not get the attention that it deserves as one of the largest and most critical engagements in the nation's history. So if anybody's more interested about this, I would highly recommend this book, talking about that first engagement, and then this one. This is more written by not an American, so I didn't, but just a lot of great pictures and insight as to what really went on in that war. Does anyone want to share anything as far as anything with their family, relatives, or anything that's... Yes?
I didn't realize it at the time, but you did mention different family names, the Feller in particular, that are connected.
Which family name?
Feller.
Feller,
And
okay.
it's buried, and you said they're buried in the Preston Cemetery.
Yes.
Our daughter Carolyn is very active, and I wish she was here because our Tompkins Jenkins, our namesake for our Legion. Jenkins is buried, I forget, not too far away. Tompkins is buried in France, and just this past week it's been done, but Carolyn applied for a grant probably 6 months ago, but we've got a headstone put next to his parents to recognize his grave over in the Buckeye Cemetery.
Good. And this will be on YouTube eventually.
Yeah. So that's all. But that I don't know exactly. Both of them were towards the end, but our Tompkins was, like you mentioned, somebody else. The Tompkins was the first one from the Preston area, but he was actually killed a month before the.
Did he die? Did Thompson die in France?
Yeah, both of them were killed.
Okay, and I didn't mention that name, did I?
Yeah, it's Tompkins or Jenkins. You didn't have either one.
And I tried to be thorough, but I guess,
But Tompkins was killed just
so
a month before the end
Tompkins and Jenkins also died in
right.
France,
And
okay.
that's our namesake for our, but
Okay.
both of them were, from Preston area, they were the first 2 people that were killed.
They were, okay. I didn't know that. Kathy?
Yeah, my dad was at the Argonne on October 1st and 2nd, so he just missed the Lost
My
Battalion.
father was actually there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
So
he
did he talk about it then when he?
I don't know, he was gassed, and which damaged his heart and lungs, and so he died when I was 5, so.
Okay, so he did not live, and
Yeah.
they may have given him that diagnosis too, hey, you're not gonna live very long.
Yeah.
Yes.
My paternal grandfather was in World War I in France, and his jacket, his uniform jacket, which was wool, hung upstairs in a mostly unused room. And we, as children, played up there, and it had holes, and we always thought, well, that must be where Grandpa got shot in the war.
Oh.
But finding out later, it was moth.
It was wrong. But was he shot in the war?
No, he was not. He worked and built train cars that delivered provisions out to the soldiers in the field.
Okay.
So he didn't really see, battle, but.
But it was a dangerous
It was, I'm
occupation
sure
to have
so.
as well,
Yeah.
at that time.
We have some friends whose wife's grandfather was an officer and served in the war and was stationed for a while in a village in France. And she does a presentation like this with some history. But
Mortagne is the name of that.
Mortagne?
Mortagne, France.
They made a trip to this village just as part of a sightseeing tour of war area. And the city found out, or the village found out, she was coming and was a descendant of this officer.
Daughter.
The daughter.
Daughter.
Daughter of this officer, granddaughter.
Daughter.
Daughter, okay. And the way she talks about the reception they got, that village held this officer and the Americans in such high regard. They treated him like royalty.
And like what year would that have maybe been?
That they went over there?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember.
I mean, like a long time ago?
Well, just to give you an example, when the Americans left, the Jeep that this officer used while he was there was left behind. They restored.
Really?
and
They
used
restored
that
his Jeep?
And they gave her tours of the area in that Jeep.
Wow.
But that was World War II.
Was that World War II?
Yeah.
Oh.
And Bonnie, you would know her, Laurel Gruen. She did a
Yes.
talk once for us
Yes.
on that whole thing. And I
About
was
her
thinking
father.
it'd be neat if she could come and do it for Brown Bag Lunch, wouldn't
It
it?
would be.
Again?
Asher was the one that tried to get her to come always.
Well, she's a good friend of mine. If you want her.
Yes,
let
we
me
work
hit
on
her
that.
up.
That'd be great.
I think I just ran across a newspaper article with she.
The
Yeah,
point
Preston
of,
Times.
the point I wanted to make was, and then this doesn't reflect it, is the way that that country honors and appreciates the efforts and the sacrifice that we as a nation gave to free them. And it was demonstrated by the way they treated her, a descendant of a soldier.
And they should, they should. I didn't realize sometimes that maybe that always went on, that we got the respect that we deserved. But, I guess my thought on this too, a lot of these casualties, their parents were of German descent. And that just had to be impactful for them over there fighting Germany when they themselves were of that descent.
Right.
That's what we had is, I've got six uncles that fought in World War II, and they actually fought against cousins.
They fought against cousins. Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Oh, yes.
I had an uncle that fought in World War I. Ted Siegel from Andrew. I'm sure some of you remember the name. He came home and he never talked about his service, except he lost an eye while he was in the service. And he had a glass eye, and he always used to tease us with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was quite a sacrifice. And then they broke it.
I want to ask one thing before everybody goes, if you could help us out. So, my Marine son was here and he was trying to help me understand why both World War I and World War II were fought in the forest of the Argonne Forest. He said, well, surely in your museum you have information about Private Harry Meyer. And we don't. And so he showed me Private Harry J. Meyer was a World War I Marine. He was from Bellevue, and he came back after he did not die. He was discharged in 1919, and he came back to Bellevue, and he was a farmer, and he didn't die until 1963. And so there must be people in Bellevue that remember that family, but he is one of the most he was a private, one of the most highly decorated Marines there were, and he's famous in the Marine Corps.
How's
And
that
he's
name
from Bellevue,
spelled?
World War
I
I.
was going to ask that too.
Harry J. Meyer, though a couple of his records say Henry.
Spell the Meyer. How's it spelled?
M-E-Y-E-R, thank you. So we need to find out a little more about him since he's so decorated. We need to find out about his family. So if anybody knows, we'd appreciate the information. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Sue. Wonderful.